All right, friends, welcome back to another episode of the Strong Life Podcast. This is episode 280. I'm with Michael Easter, author of The Comfort Crisis. And I've known Michael, I will have to dig up the emails, but I think it was pre-2010 when I was writing for a lot of magazines. And Michael, you were a editor for, was it Men's Health?
Men's Health. Yep. That's where we first met. That's where your name first came across my desk and we started talking, emailing. You'd help me on some stories, spread some fitness wisdom. Yeah, man.
I never get emails from the magazines anymore. Recently, somebody emailed me from Live Strong for stuff, but I used to write for Men's Health, Muscle and Fitness, Men's Fitness. I don't know if you remember the magazine Tap Out. Remember Tap Out magazine?
Oh, kind of. Yeah.
Yep. Well, before that, it was called Bodyguard.
Okay.
I was writing for that magazine.
That's a sick name.
Yeah.
I like that.
So they sold it to that company, or that company Tap Out bought it. Back in the day, they were like kind of dominating the MMA market with clothing. But so let's give a little intro because we lost touch. I don't know if you stopped working at Men's Health and what you went into from there. But, now I know you're a professor, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. You wrote this book, Comfort Crisis, which to me is like, the timing of it is perfect. And let's, what happened after Men's Health? What year was that? And where did that take you?
Yeah. So I left Men's Health in probably 2017.
Okay.
I'd been there for maybe 7-8 years at that point, I want to say. And I left to be a professor at UNLV. So the thing about, you have to understand about magazines is you start as a writer. Okay. So that's what I got into journalism to do. I love to write. Yeah. Love to go out in the world and meet people and put myself in sort of strange new places and just learn stuff, The higher you rise in magazines, the less of that you start to do. And so I was kind of like looking for a way out. And with this gig I have as a professor, half my job is teaching journalism, but the other half is continuing to do journalism and write and go out in the world and learn cool new things. So I'm what's considered a professor of practice. So I'm not like the PhD. I sit in my lab doing studies. Like my lab is the world and I go out and write about it for the average person,
dude.
So
I love it.
Yeah. So I've been doing that for the past 5 years. I love it. It's really fun. UNLV is a great place, really cool students. Awesome students, and continuing to write. And I wrote this book out of it. Yeah. So it's been out since May and it's been a ride for sure. It's been fun.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. You're a professor. So you said you don't have your PhD. So I wasn't sure. Are you working on that, or you don't even need it for this? You're a professor of practice.
Yeah. So journalism departments are, I think probably the best comparison that I could give is they're almost like business departments where you might have some people that have a PhD in the subject who are doing, research that you would see in like a traditional journal, right? But most of the time, the other half of professors are people who are still working in the field. So a business department might have people who have, a PhD in marketing or economics or whatever it is. But then you're going to have a handful of people who are like, yeah, I own 3 businesses and I teach classes here too, who are actually out doing the thing. So I'm kind of one of those who's actually out doing the thing.
You got a PhD in doing the damn thing. Way back in the day, I think it was like, it may have been 2001. I went to a Tony Robbins seminar and he was like getting questioned, talking about the story, getting questioned. And the guy's like, what is your degree? He's like, I've got a PhD in results. And everybody was like, yeah, motherfucker. They were going nuts. And I was like, woo, what a great answer.
I love that. Well, it's
pre-internet days.
Yeah. It's almost analogous to what you would see in strength and conditioning, right? Yes. Because there's people might have a PhD in the subject and they do studies in the lab, and that's great. We need those. We need those to know things, why things work the way they are, ask bigger questions, give us data. But at the same time, if I'm choosing between who I want to train me, between a guy in a lab coat and you, I'm going with you every time because you know what the hell you're doing. And you can also add context to the results that come in and say, yeah, the study said this, but look, I do it this way and here's why, and it tends to work better, right? So I think for a real fundamental understanding of anything, you need the research, the academic stuff, but you also need to listen to the people who are out in the field and doing the thing.
Yeah,
right?
You're blending research and probably more heavily weighing on the real world stuff. So when you left Men's Health, was this university position already secured, or what was the like in between time look like?
Dude, it was so I told you that I was, now I'm at the magazine now. I've been there for a while. So now they're asking me, okay, figure out the future of journalism, save journalism. It's just like, good hell, I don't want to work on this question. Right. So I start looking for other gigs, and I had always thought, hey, it'd be rad to, be a professor somewhere. Like, always sounded cool, because I knew the other part of the job was writing. And my wife and I decided, we were living not far from you actually at the time. We're on the East Coast. We were in Allentown, Pennsylvania area.
That's right.
Yep. And I just we decided that we wanted to move out west, but not California. Also, my wife nixed anywhere with snow. So that basically left us like Las Vegas and Phoenix and maybe a handful of other places. And I just happened to send this email to this guy who's in the journalism department at UNLV. And I was like, hey, here's who I am. We're kind of thinking of moving out. We don't really know. Do you have adjunct positions, or like, what does that even look like? And turns out they were looking for a person with a background in health journalism to come on full time. Well, I happen to work at Men's Health, so I flew out like a week later, did an interview, and they were like, yeah, come on. And I started teaching in the spring semester 2017. So.
And how, like, with regards to how frequently, like, how many classes are you teaching? Like, what kind of time does that curtail from you?
Yeah, so I always teach 3 classes. What tends to happen is, when I first started, pretty much all my time was going to teaching, because you have to build out these classes, curriculums. You're figuring out what works, what doesn't work. But once you've taught a class a couple of times, you're kind of updating the material, but a lot of the material stays the same. So, now it's not as much work as it was in the beginning, and I can focus more on writing. And UNLV has basically told me, look, like, your number one job here is to continue to write and put out material. Number 2 is teaching. So they want me focusing on that, which is nice.
And what were you writing, when you started there in 2017, you said?
Yeah.
So what was your platform that you were writing on to kind of get put your work out there?
Yeah. So I continued to write for Men's Health. So right now I am what's considered a contributing editor to Men's Health. And that just means that they send me a lot of long feature stories. If they have an idea and they need a writer for it, they'll call me up. It's kind of like this, my name's in the magazine every month, but it's kind of a formally informal relationship, I would say. Yeah. And then I did a lot of stuff for Outside Magazine. I don't know if you ever check them out.
I love that magazine.
Yeah, it's great. So them, and then I bounced around too. I'd do stuff for like Scientific American, for Vice, for just whoever,
Yeah.
But I tended to always write about health and performance, and everything from mental health to physical health to fitness to nutrition to, I guess you would kind of put that under this big blanket term of wellness, which I think wellness has sort of come to have this sort of woo-woo connotation, but I'm talking about like wellness as you would, I think, see it more in like a men's magazine type thing.
So when you're doing these feature articles, I'm thinking, when I think of Outside Magazine, of course, I know they featured guys like Laird Hamilton, like really well-known names. Did you ever have to research somebody that nobody knew about, almost like that movie, that documentary, The Alpinist? That guy was like a very under the radar guy that was just like kicking ass, and his phone would, disappear, or he would just make it disappear. Did you have somebody like that really blew your mind, that nobody knew about, that impacted your life?
Yeah. Definitely a couple. So, one that comes to mind is, Men's Health, I don't think had ever even used the term hunting in the magazine in 30 years, much less featured someone hunting. Right. And I became friends with this guy whose name is Donnie Vincent, who ended up as kind of a main character in The Comfort Crisis. And I stumbled upon his work, and I just thought he was doing something new and interesting. And, you know, initially I was like, there's not a chance in hell Men's Health is going to do a story on him. But I thought he was important for the magazine because, you know, he's a hunter, but he's not a hunter, right? I like to think of him more as kind of like this. So listeners have context. If you don't know who he is, he goes into the world's most remote, sort of dangerous areas for months at a time and hunts. But the type of hunting he's doing is, you know, he's bow hunting, and he's also really, I guess I would say, kind of reverent and intelligent about it. So he's, you know, part ultra endurance athlete because he's out there for so long. He's part locavore. He's part foodie. He's, you know, he was an environmental biologist for Fish and Wildlife for a while.
What's a locavore, Michael?
Someone who is kind of into, I guess, local organic type food, right? Because he's eating what he kills, you know? So he was kind of all these things that seem to align with the vision, with the values of the magazine, I would say. But of course, no one had ever heard of him, you know?
Right.
And anyways, I pitched a story on him, and for whatever reason it resonated, and ended up doing a feature on him that sort of got me thinking about putting this book together, which he's in. So, yeah.
So, you know, when I was thinking about the book before I called you, I was like, oh my God, before 2010, I remember I wrote an article, The Pussification of America, on my blog. And back, I'd say pre-2010, 09, 08, 07, people would comment on blogs. Once Facebook and Instagram really took off, it's like people didn't know how to comment on blogs until they could only comment on Facebook or Instagram. It was weird, but I remember it I was so fired up from coaching and being around people who would just excuses and giving up and quitting. And to me, I was always saying comfort is the enemy. And so my background in wrestling, you know, it trained me, but also you know, it did all, it was I didn't really know any better. And so it's interesting to see now this kind of generation. We see this, you know, this next teenage generation. I was training teenagers in the early 2000s. Here's the next generation. And, you know, comfort crisis is, it says exactly what's going on in this world. So when you reached out to Donnie, did you reach out to him first and say, hey, I'm going to pitch a story? Or did you get the story approved and then do the outreach?
That's a good question. I think with him, I reached out beforehand just because I don't know if this dude's even going to do it. Where there's some people where you're like, yeah, this person will do it, you know? So you pitch it, you get it approved, and you're like, hey, do you want to be in Men's Health? And they're like, hell yeah, I want to be in Men's Health, you know? But with him, it was, I think we did talk a little bit beforehand. And yeah, he was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I was like, well, no guarantees, because here are all these, you know, things stacked against us, but I'm going to give it hell. And if it doesn't work out in Men's Health, we'll maybe try it somewhere else, you know? But it worked out. Yeah.
So what was this beginning time with him? Because if from I recall from the book, you hadn't done really any of this outdoor stuff, hunting stuff, and any of that. So what was the initial meetup with him? How did he kind of bring you into his world to give you the experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, I had done outdoor stuff, but I would say I was more like a kind of, I would say, a granola athlete in the sense that trail running, mountain, but I grew up in northern Utah. It is Mecca for mountain biking and skiing. So I did that kind of stuff. You know, you go to REI type of outdoor person, but you're on the trails, you know, that sort of thing. And
that's where I am now.
Yeah, man. So I drive up to, he was doing this elk. It worked out rather well because he was doing this elk hunt in this town called Ely, Nevada, which is middle of nowhere in Nevada. So I drive up there and we hike up to this mountain, 11,000 feet is the elevation. And we're just totally no trails, you know, it's just we're just walking up the mountain through the woods. And we had to pack in all our gear, all our food. I think we were up there for maybe 4 or 5 days or something like that. But it was just so different because I've always, you know, everything, even when I do outdoor stuff like camping and that sort of thing, you know, I'm just in the Boy Scouts, that sort of thing. It's still relatively comfortable, you know, you have water in the car, you brought enough food and snacks, you have all these things, right? But that was just different in the sense that like, we didn't have that much food. So I'm starving the entire time. Like, when's the last time you were hungry for more than like 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Freezing cold the entire time.
11,000 feet is pretty high.
Yeah, dude. And I was coming from Vegas and it was so super hot, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be pretty hot up there. It was not hot.
It gets
cold.
Cold up in the mountains, right? Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I mean, even just hunting is, I mean, frankly, most of hunting is rather boring. People think that, I think when the average person who's never hunted hears hunting, they think like, oh, it must be action packed. It's like, no, you literally sit around like on a hill with a spotting scope looking for animals all day. And then when you see them, you like hike and kind of plan out hoping they're there. But a lot of it is just waiting and like with the scope, because a lot of times the animals will bed down all day. So you're kind of like, well, nothing to see here for the next 6 hours. So we'll just sit here. It's just like, oh my God, because you don't have cell service in those places, right? I didn't bring a book or magazine. So it's just like, wow, I haven't been this bored in a long time.
What did Donnie tell you to pack? And then what did he pack? Like, was it the same as you, or did he go like, does he starve it out?
So in terms of clothes, I probably should have brought more layers. He gave me a pretty good list. I mean, he's got his systems pretty dialed in. And after spending time with him, like now I get it too. I think that's a good lesson for anyone who not only wants to get into hunting, but just wants to spend more time in the outdoors. Find someone who sort of knows what they're doing and ask them what they do. And if you can, join up with them. I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah. So, and just you speaking of that, so I was down in South Carolina this weekend with Sorenex for Winter Strong. I know you were chatting with Bert over there, and I was way out of my element. There was 150 people there. I knew maybe less than a dozen of them, and everybody was a hunter, a hunting guide. And Kip Fulks, do you know Kip? He co-founded Under Armour.
Mm-mm.
He's not with Under Armour anymore. He sold off, I guess, his shares or however, and he owns a brewery. He owns a farm. Okay. But I heard him saying, like, if you want to get an elk, like if you really want to do it, you need a guide. You need to be with somebody, because even then, he said, you're out in the woods and oftentimes do not get the elk. He shared some stories about kind of all this gear, but then he would go with somebody that was experienced, but was like a little stories remind of like Donnie. Like Donnie would like pack kind of like nothing crazy. And this guy was friends with Cam Haynes, and they said he would go with like Gatorade and hot dogs, and everybody else would have the best clothing. This guy would go with shorts and a t-shirt. They'd have the best compound bow. He would have a used compound bow and secondhand arrows. And they said he was like faster than everybody, catching more, hunting more animals than everybody, but always his equipment and quote unquote stuff was like, so supposedly shitty.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. Like humans evolved as hunters. Now, could we not figure this out without $1,000 compound bow? We wouldn't be here, right? We had to figure it out how to kill an animal with literally a stick that we'd sharpen. So right. Do you know why humans are good at running?
They would chase down the animal. I think I read about that in, was it Born to Run? But I'm not like so scientific with this, but I believe like when deer run, they can't breathe. Is that correct? They can only breathe when they stop. So they would outrun them.
Yeah. So I talk about this super briefly in my book because it leads to a larger point I'm trying to make in the book. But yeah, so to hunt, as we evolved, humans were really good at cooling ourselves in the heat, right? And we evolved in these hot environments. So we can sweat. Our noses are really complex. So when we breathe in air through our nose, it cools before it hits our lungs. 2 legs is not as fast, but it also tends to be more efficient. So we have all these efficiencies where we're not fast at all compared to any other animals. Like we are athletically pathetic creatures in a lot of ways, to be honest. Like we're not great sprinters, right? Like some random dog on the street right now could out sprint any human. right? We are not very strong compared to a lot of other animals.
Oh yeah.
We're not good jukers. Go try and like chase down a dog. It's very hard, right? The dog's like bobbing and weaving, like no chance. But what we are good at is running relatively slow, really far, especially on hot days. So animals that are covered in fur, they're not efficient at cooling themselves. Mm-hmm. So what we would do to hunt these animals is we would sort of chase them down, and they would see us, and they would go, "Oh shit, human coming," and they would sprint away. Now we would just chase them down again. They would sprint away. Eventually, after you do that over 15, 20 miles, the animal starts to overheat, right?
20 miles.
This isn't happening to us. And we would then spear that thing, and that's how we would hunt. It's called persistence hunting. Yeah. Dinner.
So you're with Donnie, 11,000 feet, not on a trail, hiking. It's very hard. The weather in the mountains is, beats you up. And then it has like a mental, emotional effect on you because you start second guessing things and you got nerves and things like that. So what did Donnie tell you to pack if you were going out for a 4 or 5 day hunt? Because that's a pretty long ass hunt for a first time.
Yeah, it was like,
this was an elk hunt, Michael?
Yeah, it was. I mean, you want enough food. So food wise, you just want light stuff because you don't want to be carrying too heavy of stuff too long, so there's like these meals called Backpackers Pantry and Mountain House, and they're freeze dried. So at the end of the night, you just boil dinner and you pour it in this stuff that's literally like this freeze dried stuff, and it tastes like garbage, but it's calories, right? So stuff like that for food. And then you always want a waterproof shell and pants in case it rains, because once things get wet and cold is when you get hypothermia. So you want some waterproof stuff. You want like a down under layer below that if it gets really cold. You want some sort of layer next to your skin as well. But you're also not you're not changing out there, right? It's like, dude, let's just like bring like one of most things. Maybe you want doubles of a couple things in case things get wet, but you're not like planning on changing clothes every day, And then obviously you want some boots that can withstand a lot of miles. So what
was a good pair of boots? Because hunters have kind of these brands that they stick with, stick with.
Yeah, the ones that Donnie wears, which I've come to love, is a brand name Hanwag, HAN_WAG. And they're made in Germany, I believe. They're the only boots that I've put on and just had 0 break-in period. Now, those are like extreme boots I wore them for a month in Alaska. Those will do the trick. If you want something that's more like the week-long type hunt, Danner makes great stuff too. Or even just hiking. Like if you just want hiking boots, Danner's a go-to. Yeah.
DANNER?
Yep.
So you go on this elk hunt trip with Donnie. You have a lot of downtime. Is that where the phrase comfort crisis came up through conversation with him, where he's like, how do you say, like opening up, talking about the world? Where did the comfort crisis phrase come up?
Yeah, well, I think that where that came from is like, I worked at Men's Health for a long time. And I made this observation rather early on that was anything that I ever wrote about at Men's Health, whether it be weight loss, whether it be improving your fitness, whether it be improving your mental health, you usually had to go through some form of discomfort to improve, right? Mm-hmm. If I want to get fit, I'm going to have to train. Exercise is not fun. It's uncomfortable, right? If I want to lose weight, probably going to have to eat less. I'm going to be hungry. Being hungry is uncomfortable. If I want to improve my mental health, I have to unpeel some layers and figure out, well, what's causing this problem in the first place? And then I'm probably going to have to solve for this behavior that I'm leaning into that actually is hurting me, right? That's uncomfortable. So I made that observation. And then when I get up there with Donnie, it's like, I'm freezing cold the entire time. If we want water, we have to hike down to the stream to get it. I'm bored out of my mind. I'm starving because we don't have enough food. On and on. Everything takes effort, right? And so it was like, oh, I made this realization when I got home, like, holy crap. You come back into like the built environment in your home and you're just like, wow, like we have removed all these forms of discomfort from our lives and we just now live in comfort all the time. But like the way that we were living in Nevada was closer to what humans lived in for literally like all of time, right? That's how we came up. And so then it got me thinking like, oh, I wonder what the removal of those kinds of discomforts is doing to us. And so that led into the idea for the book. And I talked to Donnie and I was like, hey, I got this idea, man, you know, and he's like, oh yeah, dude, that's totally it. And ended up doing a much longer hunt with him.
That was when you went to Alaska, correct?
Yep.
It was like 30 days.
Yeah, it was a long time.
So, I mean, 4 or 5 days is tough. So this past weekend, I told you I was down at Winter Strong. And so I drove down, and knowing that I was going to drive down, I haven't gone camping since I was like a 19-year-old. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to be driving 12 hours. I haven't set up a tent in over half my lifetime ago. So I was like, I'll grab a hotel. A buddy of mine was like, you could get a hotel. It's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. Some people slept in their cars. They just put down the back seat if they had an SUV. Some people went like really tricked out. They had the tent on top of the truck, and some people had tents that looked like, you know, a small studio apartment. You know, they were legit. But just being outside all day, it rained half of the day on the first day. It was cold, but I loved it. And I actually struggled kind of coming home to like you start missing like the nature. So you go on this go ahead.
What do you think you learned out there? Like, what were some of your main takeaways?
I was extremely uncomfortable because I didn't know how to do any of the tactics that they were going to be teaching. My goal was to learn how to shoot a handgun, a pistol. Mm-hmm. That was like my number one goal. And Bert, you know, when there's like a main tent where they reconvene for breakfast, lunch, dinner. They've got like a big screen TV, but Bert really emphasized getting uncomfortable, being inquisitive, sitting with people you don't know, asking questions, learning about them. And maybe there were a few people up there that had never, you know, shot a gun before, but I never fired a gun before. I also learned from there was like breakout sessions, so you could choose where you're going. So my first session that I went to was knot tying. There was knot tying, there was fire starting and things like that. So Pat McNamara, who was a former, I believe he was a Delta Force operator, you know, now they call it the unit. He was teaching knots, and I struggled. And what I realized was, man, I've spent, you know, I got really like full time into strength and conditioning 20 years ago, and you're giving all the time. And strength coaches are known for just having these kind of real shitty work schedules. And then I realized I'm struggling to learn things. I've been a producer and a consumer of kind of this one lane. And I felt very out of place, to be honest with you, for a lot of it. I mean, everybody has gone hunting. They know what it's like to do these things that you're talking about. And I went shooting, and then just listening to all the nuances of the instructors. And I didn't feel like I was part of the crew until the second day we did a real tough fitness challenge. And I was thinking of you because I, you know, read your Instagram, all these runs you go on, and it really got me way out of my comfort zone. So what I learned was I love being outdoors. I do what you said you used to do, mountain biking. You're kind of there for a few hours, but then you're back home. Now, this Saturday, I'm going to the gun range. Like, you know,
nice, man.
Now, like, here it goes. So the big thing that I learned was this outdoor experience is crucial for my mental and emotional health, which is something that is, I think, strength coaches struggle with. You're very like intense, you're pushing, you're always motivating and doing all this stuff for people. Then you got to come home and make sure that you're not bringing your coach personality home. And so I wanted to do this. You know, I go fishing and do that stuff. So the big thing I learned was how awesome it really was to learn and to really be nowhere near, you know, the smartest guy. I think I'm a pretty solid strength coach, and when I'm around those people, but I wanted this like new chapter to be written in my life. So hard to pinpoint what did I learn. It was more like a feeling, and I describe it really everything I've done with Sornex events, I walk away saying like, man, that was one of the best times of my life. And I'll tell you what, the people at this event, they're really happy. And you know why? Because they're more disconnected. They're not so connected to the phones. You just saw such a vibrance, a connection. Not that that doesn't happen elsewhere, but I certainly felt it being outside. I kept my phone in my car pretty much the whole, 2 days there. And I loved it, not being connected to my phone. So I need more of it. And you had mentioned like going out on a hunt the first time. There's I'm going to look into them. They're based in Georgia. It's called Hunter Recruitment Project, where they take you hunting. They teach you the whole thing, and they take you out on your first hunt, teaching like the ethics behind it, the benefit behind it. And I'll tell you what, the people that eat what they kill, even though they're older than me, they're very lean and muscular. And I notice they look young. They might be 49, 50. They might be older than me, but they look like they're in their late 30s. So I pay attention to like the health impact that it's given to those people. And then being a dad, it's something I want to be able to introduce, my son to, and possibly my daughter, but I've got a lot of work ahead of me, a lot of learning ahead of me. And that's exciting to not, I'm surrounded by strength and conditioning books. I want to be around these hunters now and learn from them. So it's cool. And I'm kind of like, quote unquote, older. I'm 46. That's not too many 46-year-olds are doing that for their first time. So it was exciting for me. And the thing for me, Michael, though, like it's hard to say what I learned. It's just that feeling.
Yeah.
I had such a great time, and it's very important, I think, for adults, married or not, to go out and do these kind of experiences that give you adventure and inspiration. I think that's crucial for life.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, there's like, you look at a lot of the research on the benefits of learning new things and just putting yourself in new situations. Like, you're going to remember that for the rest of your life,
Yes.
And there is something to that feeling of being outside for a while. There's like the research on time in nature and specific doses of nature and types of nature. It's really fascinating. And the big takeaway, though, is that like we need to get outside more because it really speaks to us, So I think that's a smart move on your part.
We were outside. I'd get there at 7 a.m. and I'd leave at 10. So
Nice.
That's what 12, 15 hours. You're outside the whole time. And yeah, if you look at, I work at a high school full time for strength and conditioning. And so once Thanksgiving comes around, the kids don't go outside for phys ed. And then if it rains all through April, they're not outside until May. That's 6 months of indoor time. And the last time I was outside from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., I was maybe not even a teenager. It was those days of riding BMX bikes of the 80s. And those were the best times of my life. And so I want to craft a life that reminds me of being an 80s kid.
Yeah, man.
So let's get back. So you go on this elk hunt with Donnie. Did you guys kill an elk? Did you get an elk?
So he stayed there after I left, and he ended up killing an elk in Nevada. Yeah.
So in the first, you're there for 4 or 5 days and you don't get an elk.
No, we got really close, but he's not going to shoot anything that's too young. So we came upon one that was maybe 5 years old. And we got wicked close, and it was crazy. Like, I'd never been that close to that big of an animal, like out in the wild. And it was just like mind blown, and I'm thinking, this thing is giant. Like, he's definitely going to shoot it. And he doesn't. I'm like, why didn't you shoot that? He's like, oh, it's too young. So yeah. Anyways, long story short, he ended up finding an older one eventually. And the reason that he wants to shoot an older one is it generally helps the health of the herd overall, whereas shooting a younger one doesn't.
And he went, you guys went out with a rifle or a compound bow?
Bow. Yeah. So he's mainly a bow hunter. He does do some rifle hunting, but I think he's traditionally more a bow guy.
And had you ever used the compound bow before that trip?
No. And I wasn't hunting too. I was just like in journalist mode, right? I'm walking around with with my notebook that I take everywhere and just kind of taking notes and asking questions and trying to stay quiet
Who else went with you guys? Was it just the two of you?
It was me, Donnie, his cinematographer who is always filming his stuff because he does all those films that are super cool. And Men's Health also sent a photographer. So that person was with us.
And the photographer was up there for 4 or 5 days?
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Did he maybe like say to you that sometimes he just wants to hunt without the cinematographer, he just wants the purity? Did he say like that? I don't know, interferes with how he feels about the stuff?
I think he does hunt without, so his cinematographer's name is William, and they've been hunting together for, at least a decade. William goes on all his big hunts. I know Donnie does, smaller hunts closer to home that he just does solo, but William accompanies him on any big thing. And that's a good question. I think probably it's inevitable that it changes the dynamic to have a camera there. But I also think that William does a good job because William hunts a lot and is a really skilled hunter as well. And they kind of see things the same way in terms of hunting. So he's a good kid to have around if you're going to have a camera there. Like he's the guy,
Yeah, because he almost, you don't realize the way, I'm assuming the way he makes you feel is like you don't even realize the camera's there. That's what a great experience of a documentary can become. So
and he gets killer footage too. Like, unbelievable.
I'm gonna look it up. So I'll link up Donnie's Instagram. Yeah, and let's go now. So how long from there till you decide, or does Donnie invite you? I don't recall from your book where to go on this Alaska hunt where you're friggin' 30 days out there. That's fucking long, dude. A month is long.
It was a long time. We kept in touch. Like we would text and, occasional call or whatever. He was always being like, yeah, you got to hunt, whatever. And he had talked to me about, how most of their hunts are usually pretty long. They'll go up for a month or two. And I expressed interest in that. I was like, yeah, I'd like to do that at some point. And, I didn't think he'd ever invite me along. And then one day my phone rings and it's him. And, he asked me, he's like, hey, we're going up to the Arctic for like more than a month. You want to come along? And, before I can start to say no, he gets into salesman mode and he's like, dude, it's going to be the most epic adventure of all time. You're going to see the most amazing shit you've ever seen in your life, just on and on and on. Right. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I join on. And that was probably, I would say at least a year and a half after the Nevada hunt.
And were you able to get away from the teaching for a month?
Yeah, dude, UNLV was pretty awesome. Like I just was like, hey, here's the thing though, it's like, I was kind of in a position with my writing where it was like, this is what I want to do. And I think they realized like, well, it's either like we have someone fill in his class for a month or he's adios amigo, Now the benefit of the internet is that like, you can put a lot of stuff online, right? Yeah. Like you can put so much online. And like, so what I did is, I have one super big class. It's like 150 kids and they all tend to be freshmen. So this is pre-COVID too. This was right before COVID, 2019, the fall. So for that class, I had a person cover it for me. So I owe that person big time because you want the 150 freshmen, like you want to be in person for them to kind of flow them into the major. But then my other classes are all 400 level. And it's a lot of the stuff I could record a lecture beforehand and then, post it and be like, here's what you're going to do. And I had just set it all up to like unfold as a normal class would, except nothing was ever in person. And then we just reconvene, I was gone for a month. So it's like a third of the semester or something. Yeah. So then we just all reconvened and, I come back to class. I've got like this long hair and this long beard and like Grizzly Adams. And they're just like, oh my God, like what happened to you?
It's, so, you were saying could be like learning how to shoot the gun was life-changing, and I said that's actually what I told them. It was Scott Valkortson Firearms. He's based in Iowa and they make handguns and rifles. and his team was helping me. It was amazing. And you're right. So let's hear. So 30 days from what I recall, you fly out and it's like from one plane to the next, each plane gets smaller and smaller. And I've seen those like prop planes through Alaska. They, land in the water and it's rough. It's like a rough flight through the mountains, right?
Yeah, dude. So we're in this plane. So we took a plane that was like a 3-seater to get us to this one point out in the tundra. And these planes, they have the planes we were on, they're landing in the tundra. So they have these big tundra tires.
Yes.
So they can just land anywhere that's flat on the tundra. And you just kind of come in, you bounce and come to a stop. And then from there, we needed an even smaller plane because the next place we were going to was more remote. So this one is like a 2-seater, and it's sort of like you're in a bobsled, right? It's like the pilot is between your legs and you're kind of just hanging on to him. And this particular plane, it's basically a frame made out of piping, and the frame is covered in this material that's basically duct tape. It's like a polycarbon plastic tape stuff that they just wrap it in, and then a motor. So like you walk up to this plane and you can just like touch it and it just kind of like goes in, right? It's just like, and we're getting in this to fly somewhere, just as like, it's absurd. But once you actually get up in the air, it's pretty thrilling. I mean, it's like you have these amazing views of the tundra, and oddly enough, you would think, I mean, theoretically, your brain should go, this is the most dangerous thing you could ever do. And if you look at the statistics,
I'm nervous just hearing about it.
Yeah,
I feel nervous.
If you look at the statistics, it is unbelievably dangerous. I mean, those things crash all the time. But for some reason, when you're actually in it, it doesn't feel that way. And part of the reason is because you can read the pilot. Yeah. Right? Like when you're in a 747, that thing is not going to crash. But when it goes bump and you can't tell what's going on, you're just on for the ride. You can't see the pilot, see how he's reacting. You're just like, this thing's going down. Right. But you don't have that in those tiny planes. So once you're up there, it's not as bad as it sounds. Although just to get in the plane, for me, it was just like, oh my God, why am I doing this? This doesn't make any sense if I want to live past, 35, but here we are.
So it's you and Donnie, and you met some other guys, or
William, the guy that I mentioned, William, he came along.
Nice. So what were you guys going on this? What were you hunting?
Caribou.
Mm-hmm. And so how are you packing food for the 30 days? I don't recall how this went.
Yeah, we had a ton of those Mountain House freeze-dried meals.
Yeah.
I packed a ton of, I came up through Men's Health, so I'm kind of like, I got some meathead genes in me for sure. So I'm packing like those Quest bar things because I'm like, oh, I need like enough protein up there. So I packed a ton of those. You pack like as calorie dense of stuff as you can, because basically what is going to give you the most calories for the least amount of weight? That's the equation, more or less.
Right. So you guys are out there, and the goal is to get one caribou, or the goal is to kill as many as possible in 30 days. What was the goal? Yeah,
we each have one tag for our caribou. So I had a tag, William had a tag, and Donnie had a tag.
Okay.
So it's like for that month, it's you're there to fill your tag, but also, spend some time out there and just kind of see how it goes.
Amazing. So what was the worst part of that trip? Toughest part.
Yeah, it depends on how you define worst and toughest. 3 things come to mind. The sketchy, I guess I'll answer it 3 different ways. The sketchiest thing is that one night we almost lost our shelter to like these hurricane force winds. They like came in the middle of the night. We're in this like teepee, and the worst thing that can happen to you safety wise is to lose your shelter, because then you're exposed to the elements. Now, people out there, they freak out about grizzly bears. They freak out about wolves. Weather and the plane flights, that is the stuff statistically that is going to kill you. So we had this night where like these hurricane force winds came in, and we thought we were going to lose our shelter and kind of just be stranded and exposed out there. Luckily, we didn't, but that was definitely one of those that was just like, holy hell, like this is real, Coldest was one morning with the wind chill. It was probably like -20, -30. And we had this river crossing to do. So like we have to walk, like kind of wade through this river and then get out, and the wind just automatically freezes everything like that's been wet. Right. So just walking, and we had to walk like 12 miles across this frozen tundra, and it's just like so unbelievably cold that it almost becomes funny how cold it is. You're like, I didn't know a person could get this cold, you know? And then in terms of physically hardest, after I killed a caribou, which is the first big animal I'd ever killed.
And that's a rifle. You guys used a rifle, right?
Yeah, we used a rifle. After that, you know, we're packing out everything we can use from that animal. We're going to pack out.
So meaning you have to like cut it up into the different body parts. Do you skin it when you're out there or no?
Yeah. So you take off the cape and you can keep that. You take the head, and then you take all the cuts of meat that you could reasonably use. And by Alaska law, you also have to take the rib cage with you. So it ends up being, I mean, it's a lot of weight. Like our packs were probably 100 and maybe 20 each.
That's freaking heavy.
It's friggin' heavy. But the real problem is that, so we're 5 miles from camp, and we had kind of slowly been going downhill the whole time.
Oh, damn.
So we have to go uphill, and the tundra is literally the hardest thing to walk on. It's kind of like walking on beach sand because it's partially frozen. So you're kind of sinking with each step, right? So energy gets sucked out of every step. And we've got 5 miles of that, and it's at this uphill pitch. And that was like, holy hell, this is, you know, Men's Health has sent me into some pretty savage gyms to do some terrible things. But that was by far the hardest thing I've ever done. Easy. Yeah.
How did you prepare? What was you know, give me like a quick rundown. Did you go rucking before you took this trip? What did you do to prep up? Because
so a lot
120 pound ruck is when you pack out, it's on your back, or you do a sled.
It's on your back. Yeah. So we had you leave all your gear at your camp. Yep. And you basically, you know, you're hunting with effectively an empty pack, more or less. I mean, you have like a down jacket in case it gets really cold. You've got your rain gear in case, and you've got some snacks and whatever, but you know, it's effectively a really big empty pack. And so that's what you're packing the animal back in terms of training. So like a couple thoughts went into it. And one is that I wanted to basically be resilient, especially with my joints. So I've traditionally had bad ankles, pardon me, from years of playing basketball as a kid. So I wanted to make sure those were bulletproof, because if I roll an ankle bad out there, that's going to be a problem. Right. Yeah. So I did a lot of stuff to stiffen those up, get those nice. And just like,
it was like a big resource you came across for ankles.
I got a lot of the stuff from, do you know a guy named Doug Kachigian?
Oh yeah. That's right, dude. Doug's my buddy, Dr. Doug.
Yeah, dude. So Dr. Doug. Yeah, Doug.
Resilient. Let's give him a plug. Resilient Performance Physical Therapy. So they're in North Jersey, New York, and I think Doug is opening something in Connecticut. Yeah, trying to navigate instead of going to the crazy. New York has been brutal on business, especially healthcare. But Doug is a go-to guy for me, and Doug was a Air Force Special Forces. Yeah, which is he's a silent assassin, we call him.
Oh, dude. Dude's gnarly. Super smart too. Like I went with him because he's got that military background. And if you look at hunting is somewhat analogous to a lot of the mountain warfare stuff that the military has to do, where you're carrying heavy loads in a pack across pretty gnarly terrain that isn't a trail. So, and I've been friends with him for years now. So it was just like, you know, it's kind of a no brainer. So he gave me a lot of stuff. He did all my programming for this. So he did a lot of resiliency stuff. He had me lifting a couple times a week. He had me doing some rucking. He had me doing some sprints. And yeah, I mean, I feel like, by the time I was done with all those programs, I was pretty much a savage. I was overcompensated. If there was one thing I would have done differently, to be honest, I would have just pounded so much more food than I did. Cause I went into Alaska, maybe $170. I'm 6'1", so I'm generally kind of lanky. And I was I was pretty fucking shredded when I went in there. And then you add the fact that we didn't have a ton of food. I mean, like for 30 days. Yeah, I dropped down to 160. So I was pretty skinny when I came out of there. I think if I would have done things differently, I just would have.
I probably would have lost. I'm like 220. I could see myself. You were already lean. I would have lost a lot more now. I remember you were saying in your book, like, I think Donnie recommended going in with some extra body fat because you need it for warmth and energy, and you're going to lose it anyway.
Yeah, I should have been better with that. And like, I thought I was going to be fine because we had for my wife's birthday was before we left, so we went to New Orleans, and I'm like, oh, I can gain a lot of weight in this town, and I did, but it was only 5 pounds. Like, I should have gone in at like 185 or something, but it is what it is. I was definitely colder than the other dudes. I definitely left looking like someone that had just left a war zone or something, and I felt that way too, but I obviously survived it, so we're good.
So who killed the first caribou? You did?
I did. Yep.
And so you pack it out, you bring it back to camp, and then William and Donnie now they have to kill their caribou. So the hunt goes until they make a kill.
Yeah. So we're all hunting together, and it's like, okay, you're going to go first, Michael. But we're all in this together, because Donnie's really helping me figure this out, sort of guiding me in, doing all that kind of stuff. And then once I had mine, William got his next, and then Donnie was slow getting Donnie's for whatever reason. Like, we had some opportunities, but they just didn't work out. And then one of the final days, Donnie ended up killing one. We had moved to a different area, and at that point, like, the caribou migrate from summering to wintering grounds at that time. So you're kind of catching them as they all come down. And when we first got there, like, we'd see a few little herds, but by the end there, it was like March of the Penguins, but with caribou, where there's like hundreds and hundreds of them coming off a hill. And so Donnie was able to get one from there. Yeah.
So, and what did you call, like, the fur, the cape?
Yeah. The cape.
And so did you keep that?
Yeah.
Were you able to utilize it for warmth, or is there like some sort of process to before you could like use it for something?
Yeah, you have to salt it, and then you can't really use it until you've sent it to a sort of tanner, I guess you would say, but you salt it so it doesn't go bad, and then on and on, so.
Okay. So all three of you, you get your caribou, and then how does this trip go? How much more days is left where, you're still in the Arctic, and how does it go from there to segue into the book? Yeah.
So from there, I probably got my caribou close to maybe 2 weeks in. And then, William got his, Donnie got his. And then from there, it's like, the theme of the book is that I kind of look at, as I tell the story about what happened in the Arctic, and as I'm experiencing these different forms of discomfort that I experienced in the Arctic that we don't experience anymore, right? I sort of dive into them in a section. So it's like, for example, when I'm packing out the caribou, I talk about like man's relationship to exercise now, for example. And for each of those sections where I talk about some bigger theme, I'm traveling somewhere else, right? So after the Arctic, I start traveling. I go to places like Bhutan. I go to visit anthropologists at Harvard. I spend some time with special forces guys. I go to Austin for this nutrition super genius. So I'm kind of like all over the map after that. And then from there, I'm kind of like weaving it all together into this cohesive thing.
With, did you eat the elk, or how did this all end up? Because at Sorenecks, do you follow the flip-flop guy on Instagram?
No, I don't, but I saw people tagging him because I follow a bunch of people who were at like you. Yeah.
So I experienced it in May at Summer Strong. And then, so they bring out elk, and then he has this system, and people hire him to go and do that flip-flop. And at Winter Strong, not everybody, but whoever came up was like part of the flip-flop. You held it, you cut it, and you hand it to the person. And such a bonding experience. So I was wondering, like, did you enjoy a meal together with Donnie and what's his partner's name? William?
William. Yeah. Once we had the meat, we pulled out a back strap and like cut it up and cooked it in the tent that night. And we'd been, you're starving at this point. So
that
it's like
been the best.
Oh, dude, it's the best thing I've ever eaten by far. Like at that point, because food is all in context, right? Like picture the best thing you've ever ate. Would it be good if you ate it immediately after eating at like a buffet? No, it wouldn't be good. Right. Like there's all these factors that determine whether a food is enjoyable or not enjoyable. A big part of it is hunger. Another part of it is context. Like if you had to work for something, we tend to generally value things that we work for more than things that we didn't work for. So that factors in. It was just magical.
That must have been great. And so, speaking of the book, The Comfort Crisis, you were on Joe Rogan's podcast recently. It was not long ago, but, he gets like inquisitive, and you're talking about all these uncomfortable situations and they maybe sound extreme to him. He's like, well, look, people aren't going to do that. And what you basically said is, this could be kind of incremental in people's lives. It could be as simple as park further away when you're going shopping. Like don't keep looking for the front row parking spot, and take the stairs instead of the elevator. And as simple and elementary as that sounds, I think that adds up. It's like that inches speech from the movie Any Given Sunday. These inches add up, or it could be in a negative. If you're always, for example, it's cold here in New Jersey. We had snow a week and a half ago, so it was icy out. And but then today I told my son, I was like, dude, ride your bike to school. Like, I don't want to keep driving you to school. Be cold for a few minutes, because I know it's going to benefit him. And I look back to when I was a kid, we mentioned I was outside from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. If it snowed, I still took my bike out. I remember jumping snow ramps and just like outside. And we would go to like a convenience store and you get like a Dr. Pepper and Reese's peanut butter cups, and then you were back out. Or we played street hockey, and we do not see that. I mean, I haven't seen it. I'm sure that 99% of the listeners will say, correct. I don't see kids playing street hockey. Even, this is a thing in sports, Michael, is kids are lacking that grit, and that toughness. And it's because we now don't play street basketball. We go to the basketball club. But if I look at like wrestling, we go to the wrestling club. But some of the best wrestlers in the country have like these shitty training gyms. The Cuban weight room looks worse than a prison yard, and they've got some of the best wrestlers. Iran has some of the toughest conditions. India is starting to climb up in the Olympic ranks, and they wrestle in sand pits.
Yeah.
And so I think if, I say often, comfort is the enemy. And my motto in my own mind is, you got food on the table, roof over your head, don't complain.
Yeah.
People seem to struggle with this, Michael. Like they complain about fucking everything. And so when you were writing this book, was there like a feeling of you where, you are really like break it down and you have these stories of what you did or what, other people have done? Did you have this like feeling where you were like, man, people just need to toughen the fuck up? End of story, end of book.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was that. I mean, I think even bigger for me is that, I can tell you this personal story, and I've told this, I think, on a couple podcasts, but I think it kind of illustrates the point I'm trying to make, is that, when I fly from Las Vegas to get up to the Arctic, you got to take like 5 flights, right? So the first one's from Vegas to Seattle, and I'm on this 747. I'm like in fucking 5th class. Like, it's just the worst experience a human could have, right? It's like the seat is cramped, the plane's too hot, bathroom's cramped. Like, yeah, they put movies on the seat in front of you, but those movies, they're shitty, right? Coffee sucks. Like, everything about flying is terrible.
Sucks.
So then I go spend a month in the Arctic, right? Where it's like, I'm cold every second of every, like bone chilling cold every second of every day. If I want water, I have to like hike down to a stream and fetch it in this water bag. And I better bring the rifle because the grizzlies hang out there too.
Yeah.
Right? If I need to go to the bathroom, I got to walk out on the tundra and I got to squat, right? Also have to bring the rifle. To do anything takes effort, right? Yeah. Food, like I'm starving the entire time. It's just, everything is hard. So when I get back on that plane that goes from Seattle to Vegas after the Arctic, like, what do you think my experience of that flight was?
You were in heaven.
Oh, dude, it was heaven, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm warm.
Yeah.
I hadn't sat in a chair in a month with padding. It was just like, oh my God, this 5th class seat is just amazing. You know, the movies that the plane is showing, I'm like, holy hell.
Changes your frame of reference.
Oh yeah. It's like, dude, I hadn't seen a screen in a month. This is the most captivating film I've ever seen. It's like Fast and Furious 300 or whatever version we're on. And like, you go to the bathroom and you're at 30,000 feet, you hit the button and hot running water comes out. You know, it's just like, holy shit. Like, the point I'm trying to make is that we live in like the most amazing world in so many ways. It doesn't even matter like really what economic class you're in, unless you're at like the very, very, very bottom, right? The average person today has like 10x the conveniences and comforts that like even a king would have had 400 years ago, 500 years ago. Yeah. So like you come back into that and it's just like, I'm never complaining again. Like, and I think that that's the benefit of going out and doing something like that. And it doesn't have to be extreme. I think you can get it. Like, I think that you probably felt it your time in South Carolina. Like you said, it was like just this feeling, right? So you come back into your normal life and you can appreciate all this stuff that traditionally, if you were like me, you would be bitching about, right? It's just like, wow, this is great. It's just a complete mind shift. And you get a lot more grateful for everything we have in the world we now live in. Because the thing is like, you look at a lot of psychological studies, the human mind is programmed to look for problems. Now, this used to keep us vigilant as we evolved, right? If you're always looking for problems, you can say, oh, there's something lurking in the bushes. Oh, we don't have enough food. Oh, this, oh, that will keep you alive. Well, nowadays, we don't have those sort of problems that are really going to end us or kill us, right? But we're still attuned to looking for problems. So you poll people and you ask, do you think the world is getting better? They've done this in massive polls of Americans. Only 6% of people think the world is getting better. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course the world is getting better, right? Because we don't have an ability to think back 50, 100, 200, 500 years, right? We just like, oh, well, let me just like think of 10 things.
What the age category was of the people who were polled. You said it was a massive poll.
Yeah, I think it was a Nielsen poll. So they're doing like 18 to whatever, 80 or however old.
Do you know Joe DeSena from Spartan?
I was on his podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just he was probably the way you guys communicate is like right, because he always talks about change your frame of reference. The Spartan race. And so I've done podcasting with him. And when I would go up to Vermont, same thing. Phone doesn't work. Joe throws, everything is like, he comes up with these ideas and it's like, I try to explain to people, Joe said, you're going to do something from like, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and it'll be in a barn. I want you to be ready to do something from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. and not have lunch. And you're probably going to be outside. He'll rope you into something else. He does it like on purpose. And I think people might think like he's just crazy, but he realizes that it changes people's lives. Like you went away for 30 days. I've done things for just a few hours in my life that I'm still utilizing those lessons from those experiences. I've done like intensive wrestling camps for a week when I was a kid, but I don't know, 2009, maybe I did a 12-hour like Navy SEAL challenge that Mark Devine, we helped him organize it. And I still use stuff from 13 years ago. It was a life changer. So what has been, Michael, like, I'm not sure if when you're writing the book, if you knew, I'm sure you knew like there was going to be kind of a target audience that was going to read it, but have there been like certain, people or audiences that read it that you didn't think would read it? Like, did you think maybe a lot of corporate leaders would read this? Like, who has read the book that's come back to you and been like, man, I started implementing, a cold shower, or just, reading your book, by the way, I never wanted to do that cold, hot shower contrast. I read your book and I was like, don't be a pussy. I started doing the contrast showers every day.
Nice.
just
That's awesome.
just for the mental aspect. I
Yeah.
honestly don't know if I'm feeling better from it physically, if it's doing some recovery, but I just, I know that if I'm always taking that hot shower, it's just the comfort. I could handle a minute of cold. And in the beginning, it wasn't a minute, it was 15 seconds.
Yep.
And it was 20 seconds. Yeah. So who
Yeah.
has read the book that you were like, wow, I didn't think they were going to get it? And I got the audiobook. So when I say read the book, I
Yeah.
have the audio. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been interesting because I mean, traditionally I'm writing for a mostly male audience, like men's health type reader. But do you know who Melissa Urban is?
Oh, yeah. She visited my gym in '07 before she was doing Whole Life 30 challenge.
Yeah. Okay. So I sent her a book because we had a friend in common,
Mhm.
and she loved it. And so she's like, she especially loved the chapter on rucking. And so she's really shared the book and rucking with her audience, which her audience, this is a generality, of course, but her audience tends to be female, probably
Yep.
like 20 to 50 years old.
Correct.
So the book has really just sort of taken off with that kind of crowd too. You know what I mean? So it's just been interesting. I've had people, I had a lady who was like 79 years old, just sent me an email and was like, I read your book. I'm going to do something really hard, really challenging that gets me out of my comfort zone. Don't worry, I won't die. Like, sign this lady. I'm like, holy shit. Like, that's amazing. You know, I've definitely had a lot of vets and current SF guys read it and send emails, which is cool. One guy, I don't know if you can see it. You can kind of see it right there, that flag.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was a Green Beret, had that flag under his kit when he was in Afghanistan, like this super hot area for a bunch of years. And he was like, dude, I got back and my mind was sort of in a strange place. And I read your book and it like helped me. So here's
It's
this
therapeutic.
thing I wore. Yeah, dude.
Hard things are therapeutic. And you got one of those flags. I've got one up there by a guy I trained before he went into Marines. He became an officer and captain. So those flags mean a lot. When somebody gives it to you, that means you have done something in their life that shaped them. And so, yeah, those are big deals. But for me, hard things are therapeutic. I often talk about iron therapy, like lifting of the weights, but you've known me from the early years where I think I got lucky where when I started training in my backyard, I mimicked Rocky IV training and like the bodybuilding of the golden era, the 60s and the 70s. And so in the backyard, I trained with stones and I felt like it was like free to not be in the gym and, how do you say, this is where I'm limited to these four walls and this equipment. And I fell in love with it. It was interesting to see how people did this during COVID. And I was like, I did it because that's the equipment I had. I couldn't afford back in 2002. You couldn't find bumper plates. I don't know where you would get it. Or the barbells were crazy expensive. So I just used stones and things from the scrap yards. And there was a emotional I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say emotional healing, but it does something really special for you. And so this book to me, The Comfort Crisis, really states where we are in this world. I work with a lot of teenage athletes, and I also work in a school where if anything is out of sorts for a kid, parents want to intervene. And I need to explain to them that, my job is to protect your son and daughter. And the way to protect them is I got to get them strong and fast and tough. And the way to do that is we do hard things. And it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to require discomfort outside of the weight room from, like you said, proper nutrition, extra work, just even like actually being regimented and having a good, healthy schedule is uncomfortable for people because they want to be on their phone at night. And now they have to engage in discipline. So do you think, just a question, like almost like off, I didn't think I was going to ask this, but, speaking of the teenage population, do you think that teenagers, I think, struggle with like focusing on something, but this would be a great book for teenagers. What would you Have you spoken to groups of teenagers? I guess your freshmen are teenagers. They're 19, right? Something like
Yeah,
that.
they're 19 to 20, 21, something
Well,
like that. So yeah, I mean, I talk to them quite a bit, and I've definitely had a lot of people say they shared, if not the whole book, but at least certain sections of the book with their kids, which has been kind of cool.
yeah. What do you think is next? You've written, an amazing book, and it's impacting people all around the world. Are you being asked to come out and speak on this topic to like corporate or sports organizations? Are you doing any of that?
Yeah, I've definitely talked to some corporate places over the last few months, which has been just been fun. Those are fun.
Right. What's your advice for them? They're working behind a computer, they're sitting often. What do you encourage them to do?
Well, I talk about that concept Masogi in the book, which is like pick one really hard thing every year and do that. You should have a real 50-50 shot of finishing it. Something outdoors, something you just kind of made up that's kooky. And the beauty of having the 50-50 shot is that anyone can do it. I don't care if you are, the stud who does ultra marathons in the office. I don't care if you're the lady who like has a grandkid and like doesn't go to the gym or walk even often, right? Like you can pick something that you think is beyond your abilities and go out and see if you're capable of it. Because I think we generally undersell our potential, what we're capable of. Mm-hmm. And when we go beyond what we thought we were capable of, we can look back and see that we're underselling ourselves. And then we can take that attitude back into the normal life, right? So the point of doing some really hard thing like that once a year is not to do the one really hard thing. It's to get this psychological benefit that then you can take into your everyday life, right?
Correct.
So I talked to them about that. I talked to them about the benefits of being bored, like we're never bored anymore, but it turns out that boredom has a lot of upsides for mental health, for creativity, and just for like being aware of what's going on around you.
You've mentioned this in several podcasts, and I forgot to bring that up. You spoke about like the connection of boredom to like, kind of like digging deep within yourself, and then it brings about creativity.
Yep.
So how did you relate that to people in corporate, like being bored? How do you expand on that for them?
So I talk about how, we spend 96% of our time indoors now, 90 or maybe 93, I think. 96 or 93. So it's a lot of time, and COVID has only turned that up, right? Mm-hmm. So I talk about the benefits of going outside for stress reduction, for creativity, just for general mental health, for avoiding burnout. And one of the benefits is that if you don't bring your cell phone, you can lapse into a bored state where your mind can wander, and that's really restorative for your brain. And so, like I argue, you look at how much time people spend on digital media now. It's like 12 hours a day, right? We like never have time to be bored anymore, because anytime we feel this like discomfort of boredom, which can actually be a good thing, we just automatically kill it with our cell phone, right? Or a screen, or a computer screen, or our Netflix screen, or whatever it might be.
People, I see my kids, they're watching a movie and with the phone. And I'm like, man, it destroys the special moment that you could kind of like get lost in a movie.
Yeah.
Because you're 100%. All right, I don't like this part of the movie. Let me check my phone. And it's kind of like all over the place. I'd really love to see what would be the effect of a company's like productivity and overall success if they implemented like some sort of mandatory every day from 12 to 1, everybody has to leave and do something physical, whether it's raining, shit weather, or even if it's 30 minutes. Of course, they'd have to have places for people to change and shower, or maybe they don't have to. But I would love, like, are you able to name a corporation you spoke to, Michael, or no?
I spoke to like one is this big, they make it's called Endress and Hauser, and they're one of those companies that like you go, wait, what do you make? But it turns out they're like one of the biggest companies in the world.
How many people are like employed in one building?
Well, they have locations all over the world. So one of their US headquarters is in Indiana. And I don't know how many people work there, but I was probably speaking to like 200-300, I would say.
Yeah.
And they really glommed on to that idea of getting outside more, trying to do something hard once a year, and just figuring out ways to just, not do the next most comfortable thing all the time.
They could literally set up like an outdoor training area. Kettlebells and center mass bells could be outside. Sleds could be outside, made from tires that people could pull. You know, there could be area for running or walking. Walking might be the challenge for somebody. Somebody else, like you said, might be more of a stud in doing something, but I would love to see the impact it would have on their happiness, their emotional health, where it's like at lunch, you're out, no matter the weather, no matter how cold, no matter how hot. It would be amazing, I think.
Yeah, sure. There's definitely some companies in Scandinavia that instead of having like your standard office party in the US where, you know, you bring in pizza and brownies and everyone kind of talks, they do these like group workout things and you have to do them. Bjorn Borg is the company, and it's a famous tennis player who started a company that makes athletic wear. And I think that they do something similar, and they say it really brings the company together.
I think I've seen that. And did you ever read the book, Let My People Go Surfing, by the founder of Patagonia? That's what it's about. It's like, let them, if they want to go surfing and the surf is good, or they want to go hunting, like let them engage, let them go. Don't lock them down on the schedule, because they'll be more productive. Yeah. And the guy, Scott Valkortson, who owns the firearms company, I think like his employees requested, because he would work extra Monday through Thursday and then Friday half day and go to like a cabin that his family has. And then the employee said, "Hey, can we do that?" He said, "Absolutely." And he said, our productivity and our income and like overall success went up. Yeah, they have more freedom to go, and maybe they go on a hunt on the weekend and things like that. So what has been a question that you wish somebody's asked you during all these interviews, because you've been on big interviews, and I'm sure people are kind of asking the same bland questions. I try not to ask the bland questions, but what are you like, man, why does nobody ever ask me about, you know, fill in the blank?
Well, no one's ever asked me this question. That's a good question, man. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's one I'd have to think about. I feel like I usually get some pretty good questions. You ask some questions that I haven't gotten before. I'm trying to think what would be the question that people should ask me.
Well, let me ask you this. How was your conversation with Joe Rogan? Sometimes I feel when he does a conversation, it seems good. Sometimes I feel he's really playing devil's advocate. One time years ago, I think he did a podcast with a buddy of mine. I think he was like very high, and I felt like the conversation didn't go so smoothly. He was like really out of it. I think he was really high.
Yeah. He's been known to dabble. I don't think he was high when I spoke to him. I enjoyed the conversation. It was fun. You know, I think the reason that people love him is that he goes off on these strange tangents, you know, that are just like interesting. He has a really amazing recall of information.
Yes.
Unlike anyone I've seen. So that's always fun, because you don't know what he's going to say. And, you know, for me, it was fun because it's like, I'm there to talk about the book. I know we're going to talk about it, but I don't know what else we're going to talk about. So it's kind of like, you're kind of like rolling the dice. Like, let's see where this goes. You know, like we started talking about the book, and then all of a sudden we're talking about the history of Abercrombie and Fitch. Then we're talking about, it's just like this ping pong ball, but it's fun as hell. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. He's a nice dude. I can't say enough good things about the guy. So,
well, when you mentioned Nevada, I started thinking of like UFOs. There was a documentary. It may have been from Arizona. My father-in-law told me about it, and I watched it and like scared the shit out of me. I was like, fuck, I never should have watched that shit. But they kind of like went off into like some, they may have gone into Nevada, into that area 51. And all the kids got like sucked up into the UFO. But the thing that didn't get sucked up to the UFO was the camcorder. Okay. And then somebody, probably security, took the camcorder, put it in a box, and shipped it back to the school. And then somebody was going through like the storage and found it.
Yeah.
And then the movie ended, meaning like they were about to find out what happened, because the kid was recording the lights. I'll have to Google what it was. And then another buddy of mine who Doug knows, I'm not going to mention his name on the podcast, but he was doing some training. He was a SF guy. He was doing some training out in somewhere in Nevada. And he said he woke up like a little earlier than he was supposed to. So he's like, I just kind of kicked back and just looked up at the sky. And he's like, then I started seeing some shit flying around. And he's like, really fast shit that would just appear and disappear. And they were doing some like psychological like examination of these guys going through the training. So they were asking me, he's like, I did not mention I'm seeing that, because then they would have had me fail my psych exam. So you're out in, I don't know if are you in Vegas?
Yeah, we're on the outskirts of Vegas. Yep.
Yeah, so some stuff happens out there. So have you seen UFOs? Because I'm a believer. You've seen a UFO?
I can see where Area 51 is. Like when I go running, like I'll end up on this mountain, and you can see out into the distance where Area 51, would be. Yeah, it's one of. I don't know. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I think it's highly possible, but I know. I mean, I do know that weird stuff happens there, right? I mean, it's like there's a reason it's highly classified and highly guarded.
They fly the employees there, correct? That's how they commute to work. It's like
I don't know. Do they? Okay.
I think I saw like a documentary. They fly on an unmarked airplane. It's probably like a super fast flight. The employees fly there. End of the workday, they're flown back, and somebody followed this guy, and he's like, "Oh, we saw you went there." It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like shutting the door on them. But I'm a believer, and
nice.
This could go down the rabbit hole, but I don't want to go into that. So you've never seen any like strange things flying around?
No, not to my knowledge. I mean, look, man, I go to bed at like 8:30. So I'm not the target market, who's out there super late in the desert. So
yeah. So one of the guys, Derek Woodski, I feel like he's the most interesting man in strength and conditioning. He wouldn't consider himself a strength coach. He's much deeper than that, but he was out in, now he's in Montana, but he was out in near like Death Valley area, California.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had mentioned seeing some things. And then a guy you mentioned, like a photographer who was also a waiter, had like tons of video and photo footage of like, UFOs flying around. So pretty wild stuff. So I don't know how far, wherever that area of California is, like Death Valley, how far is that from Vegas?
I think it's like a couple hours, 2-3 hours. It's all that weird Mojave Desert area, man. It's, there's something eerie about the desert. The desert is a strange place. I love it, but I think there's a reason people associate it with strange things like that.
It's a little bit scary. I'll have to find that, show that my father-in-law told me about, but man, it was freaking scary. So where you've got your newsletter, which I think you send it out like once a month. You don't send it out too much. I follow you on Instagram. Love seeing the runs, the training. Where would you like people to connect with you?
Yeah. So Instagram, I'm relatively active there. Michael_Easter. I got a website, eastermichael.com, and the book is The Comfort Crisis. So
So I've got the audio book. I listen to it while I'm driving. And, you mentioned just kind of like the disconnect from technology. So when I'm driving, I'll listen to it. But some people will do it, on a walk or whatnot. But the book is very inspiring because it makes you like look inside yourself, and there's example after example where you're like, man, I got to get tougher. I got to do 15 seconds cold shower. All right, I'm going to go for the minute. And so it's not that somebody has to go on a 30-day, hunt. You're saying you got to get back to doing these little things to reconnect, and they're therapeutic. I'm looking forward to, the people that listen to the Strong Life podcast. That's really what we embody, is like how to take strength beyond the gym walls and apply it to life.
Yeah.
And by the way, Michael, like in the strength and conditioning community, there's such a two-sided thing where people are like, oh, you're only worried about working hard and sweating. And like, that's the problem, I think, is some workouts, they're too perfect. And that never prepares you for sport or life because it's so scientific.
Yeah.
You need hard shit.
Well, and the world isn't perfect, unfortunately. Right. So what are we preparing for here? A scenario that we theoretically think is going to be perfect in the future that we know is not going to be perfect. It's like sometimes you just got to throw some hard shit at a human and they'll figure it out. And then next time hard shit is thrown at them, they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember when this happened. I have this, I mean, it's not it's not that crazy of an idea. It's like, that's how things have worked forever. It's like, we get into a hard situation, we learn from it, and we move on. Next time we face the hard situation, it's not as hard anymore.
Right. A big chunk of the world is resisting hard things, though. So I hope Comfort Crisis like makes its way into, I guess like groups or organizations of people who have, are just seeking comfort all the time.
Yeah.
So this has been great, my bro. Comfort Crisis, Michael Easter, Strong Like Podcast. I hope everybody goes out and picks up the book or gets the audio book like me. Nothing better than a book, though. The smell of a book and hearing the pages. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's next after this, because this is a very successful book. So I'm excited to hear what's next. Everybody who listen and watch, make sure you follow Michael and share this. So if you get a photo of yourself with Michael's book, post it on Instagram, tag Michael and I want to see where people are listening, reading, and what they do from the book. So Michael, hang tight while we shut it down. And again, everybody, thanks for listening, watching, and sharing with friends. We will talk to you soon.